Hello, everybody. My name is Marshall Hurst. Today, I'm going to be talking about my experience working abroad with Umbo. They're an IES Abroad. I did a summer internship with them and from June to August of 2019 in Sydney, Australia. So what is Umbo? Umbo is a startup company that was just founded about 3 years ago in 2018. The purpose of Umbo is to provide online allied health services. This is an effort to tackle the issue of therapy and providing different types of therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy in areas of rural Australia. It can be very difficult for people in those regions to receive access to these types of things, which I'll touch on a little bit more later. Next, we have social enterprise. By that, I mean that this business was more focused on the people rather than the business efforts itself. They emphasized that strongly when I was there during my internship about how we are there to support people and that we are a social enterprise. So that is a very huge value that they hold. They also have a website. You can see the link provided on the PowerPoint there. Don't forget to add the .au for Australia if you decide to look it up. But you can see how interactive their website is and you can find out more information there. All right, so who founded Umbo? We have 3 major players within this business. The first one being Wei Yo, who is the CEO of the business. This is their 4th time founding a business. Wei, and then next, they did OIC in Cambodia. And after that business, they did Happy Kids Clinic. And so they have a lot of experience in working with kids. The 4th business being Umbo is what they founded. So Wei Dev is in Sydney, but they ended up moving to Asia and they held that business there for over 5 years. And they noticed that in Cambodia, they lacked a lot of speech therapy options and that they didn't have a lot of resources available or even a lot of courses in order to teach people to join the field. So it was a huge struggle that happened with speech therapy and a lot of providing access to those types of allied health services. There are many issues that people might need speech therapy. Maybe they have throat issues or so forth, or other kinds of disabilities. So Wei decided to start OIC in order to help raise funding in order to promote these types of therapies to be provided in places like schools and clinics in order to help people. Over 7 years later, OIC kept growing and growing, and more speech therapists ended up starting to move to Cambodia. Eventually, Wei moved back to Sydney and noticed that the same problem was happening in Australia as well. So they founded Umbo. So that's the history behind this. Wei also has over 15 years of experience working with speech pathology and all sorts of different clinical services. Next here, we have Ed Johnson. They are the CCO of the business, which means Chief Clinical Officer. Ed is actually a speech pathologist himself. He is a PhD candidate for online therapy, which is very cool. He also works all across Australia. He is constantly traveling in order to provide speech therapy services. And lastly, we have Francesca Pinzone, who is the COO. There was, for over 15 years, they've worked on social impact issues. They also worked at UNICEF in India. And so they have a lot of experience that really focuses on making an impact and improving people's lives. Francesca also has a lot of hands-on experience, being that her son was also a user of speech pathology services. So she really sees the benefit of that. Now, again, the reason that Umbo was founded was to acknowledge a problem. You can see this quote here I have on the slide. Children living in rural and remote Australia have limited access to allied health professionals. By allied health professionals, that means things like occupational therapy, speech pathology, and so forth. They noticed that these services weren't being provided in areas of rural Australia, which impacts, so for example, in places like education, employment, and social interactions, there was no sort of these types of services. The results of this is poor health and economic outcomes. The key here really is early intervention for providing those services to the people who need them. The earlier you provide them, the more improvements you can make on their lives. And that has a long-term social and economic inclusion effect. Now, the solution that Umbo is offering is providing online allied health services to those who need it. Big emphasis on online therapy, meaning that people can use a webcam in order to access the services they need. As we see here, ever since COVID hit, a lot of people are using online or remote therapies in order to still get the benefits and the types of attention that they need for different issues. What they do is they find a clinician who can match a family. So they use a third party to connect the two of them together. And usually these families live out in the bush, meaning very, very rural Australia, away from major cities. And so it is considered definitely a remote place to be. It allows children to access therapy wherever they are. And also it allows therapists to work from home, which is very nice. It can provide a more casual atmosphere. People can take their time and go at their own pace, being that they're using online appointments. They also use an interactive video calling platform, which puts therapists in your own home virtually. And online therapy is considered to be equivalent to in-person therapy. I just mentioned that Ed is a PhD candidate who's the COO for the business. So he had already had mountains of evidence that are continuing to piling up, saying that the benefits are the same from between online therapy and in-person therapy. Online may even actually provide more benefits, and I'll touch more on that right here. Therapy at home means less travel time, less expenses, and less stress. It also means that there's no wait time. If you were actually to go to the bush of these rural areas where these family lives, it may take months for them to actually get the access they need. Maybe there's a long wait time or they're on a waiting list, so they can get quick support. Also, it's a person-centered therapy, meaning that they are just focused on you for 24/7, meaning that anytime, anywhere, they can get in touch. And these are some more continued therapies that highlight, or continued benefits that highlight the benefits of online therapy. Online therapy is continued to grow because of its positive impact. And now with coronavirus, we're considering this even more evidence that online therapy is extremely beneficial. So online therapy is finally getting the recognition that it needs. So who works at Umbo? We have 2 speech pathologists who are Ed and Jess, 2 occupational therapists, Helen and Purani. And then we have 6 non-clinical staff, meaning the CEO, the COO, the marketing director, the marketing and communications officer, the clinic admin officer. This is actually pretty neat because the time I was working there for my internship, there were just 3 people, the CEO, the COO, and so forth, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, along with 3 of us interns. So it's really great to see that Umbo is truly expanding and growing. So at my internship, I was a business management intern. I worked directly with Francesca because Francesca is the COO, the operational officer. So we worked on internal operations, and that was a lot of what my time was focused on there, including things like human resource and customer management. Also just generally setting up a platform, making sure that we had information readily available in the right places, documentation being taken care of. And we also did the NDIS audit. NDIS stands for National Disability Insurance Scheme. So the NDIS is similar here to in the United States insurance. If you have insurance, mean that you can use that type of insurance to apply to things like therapy and so forth. In Australia, if you have NDIS, that means that you probably don't have enough income in order to receive those services. So the Australian government provides NDIS, and so different family members can get therapy at a lower cost. I also did website work, some captioning work to make sure that all of their videos were captioned, so everybody had access to the information, the videos, especially the deaf and hard of hearing communities in Australia. I also did handover documents. And by that, I mean that we would have all of our documents ready, and we would take those documents and make sure that they're ready to be handed over to the Australian government. We also did things with induction, similar to handover, but basically helping make sure that everybody knows who to get in contact with and that everybody's on the right path to make sure that they are clear on how the company works and what the structure looks like. So in short, I was also an all-around intern. So if somebody asked me to do something, I would do it. The location that we worked in was called the Haymarket HQ. It was a very open environment, very co-worker, very cooperative. It was in Sydney, in the Central Business District, or CBD as it's commonly referred as. I lived in an apartment just north of Sydney when I was staying there, and it was nice because I could just take the train to go to work. And on the train, we would cross the famous bridge that just went over the harbor. So it was really nice to see, go over the harbor right before going under the city and arriving to work right in the middle of the city as we get off the train. So it's really nice to see. The actual location of the Haymarket is right in the middle of Chinatown. But it was really nice. It was a very cooperative environment. There were a lot of startup businesses there. People would just set up their tables all around the open concept type of building and just get what they needed to done, which increased more collaboration and so forth. A lot of the businesses there were partnering with other businesses in China. There was also free coffee, which of course was amazing. So now let's talk about some pros and cons, specifically about experiences navigating this type of system. The positives are that the Umbo had a very big vision. They're very committed. They're very driven, very collaborative team. They're making a mark in the therapy field, and everything is very hands-on. In America, we don't hear a lot about online therapy, such as like occupational therapy being provided online. And so in Australia, this business really wanted to change that to make it more widespread and easily accessible for people. The cons were things like funding. That was always an issue to retrieve funding to make sure that the business could continue to run well. The business ran well for this entire time since starting, but having the funding was one con. There's also some hesitation. Some people see that it's online therapy and they're less likely or maybe even more resistant to taking advantage of those services. And then we have awareness. This relates to my next point in marketing. So we would do a lot of marketing campaigns, but we can only reach a limited amount of people, when in reality, it's very important to contact those people in rural areas, right? And so it's very important for us to not only contact the people in Sydney around us, but to contact the people all around Australia. So that was a difficulty that came up. So in the time that I was working at Umbo, we did an NDIS audit. And by audit, I mean that we had to make several different documentations in order to prepare them as documents to show what services we are providing in order to give to the government. Basically showing the parents that are needing these therapies and showing that we are giving NDIS discounts to those people who are using the services. And so there were about 70 policy and procedural documents created. And so we focused a lot on making those documents, preparing them to make sure that we passed that audit and maintained that standing. We also did interviews. We had new interns who were coming in and joining, and so we were involved in that, which was a very neat process. We also did induction, meaning, like I mentioned before, making documentations, making sure everything's ready to be sent over to the workers. And then we did WIPs, or works in progress. My boss required that we had pretty much documented what we did every day, the what kinds of things we were working on and why, the pros and cons. Was very involved. We also had bi-weekly team meetings and social media content calendar. So that means we made an entire calendar that put down exactly what we were doing, what posts we were making, what posts we were not making, what time we would make our social media posts. We wanted to make sure that we were posting them at a time that would have more reach, and so we could gain more of a following. And so, following their pages on Instagram and Facebook, by gaining that kind of traction, it helps the company gain more awareness. We also did cold calls. So a lot of us interns were calling people all over Sydney and Australia about the services that we offer and provide. This also included emails. We sent probably over 100, 150 or emails to different people, and we got some replies. And when they would respond, we would offer our services to them, engage with them a little bit, and then hand it off to our boss so the two of them could get in touch and handle what needed to be done afterwards. We also did some website design as well, which was very clean, trying to make sure how we were structuring our information to make sure it was easily accessible, in order to, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, increase our reach. So it's very neat that we got that wide scope of the business. And you can see these couple of pictures are here on the slide. The left is the three of us interns under IES Abroad. We worked in the same place together, which was very cool. And the second picture that I have on the right-hand side is what the workspace looked like. So you can see it has a kitchen. There's some chairs, some tables in the back. We have some coffee along the left-hand side. And of course, which is extremely crucial, we also had a ping pong table. So it was kind of nice. So if you're feeling a little bit stressed at work, you can de-stress by taking advantage of the ping pong table. So thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you learned enough about my experience in Australia and Sydney working for Umbo. Thank you.